Chapter 1. Previously on France. 1770. The future of France rests on the shoulders of a young Louis Auguste, recently named heir after the untimely demise of his brother and father. And today is the day this 15-year-old boy becomes a 15-year-old man, no? Okay, here we are. I want those great-grandkids on my desk by February. Have fun, you two. And he leaves him in the room with a 14-year-old girl named Maria Antonia. At least until she came to France and they told her she's Marie Antoinette now. She's the Archduchess of Austria and daughter of the great Maria Theresa. And the thought of the French and the Holy Roman Empire being friends was still as much of a shock to a lot of the French as it is to me. So, good to see you. Maria, right? Yeah. Do you mind if we don't?
Yeah, let's not, no.
Oh, thank God. I mean, not that you're, it's just that...
Yep.
Understandably, they tucked into bed and faced apart, thinking the awkward part of the wedding was over, until the next morning when... Congratulations! Louis became king just a few years later. Inheriting a kingdom as a teenager is kind of like being a child actor. It rarely ends well. If all you know about him is the revolution, you might expect that he went completely off the rails as a mad tyrant, but really, if you've seen my Pedro II video, the two were surprisingly similar. It bears repeating that even the best monarch does not extend his merits to absolute monarchy as a form of government, but with that said, after Louis became king at the age of 19, his sole mission as king was to be loved by the people. In fact, as a young man, he was a bit of a revolutionary himself, pushing forward an edict of religious tolerance that extended the right to exist to Jews and even Protestants. Always consult public opinion, he would say. It is never wrong. The trouble began in the fact that Louis wanted to be liked by everybody, and anything too forward-thinking was sure to draw the ire of the nobility. You see, France was massively in debt, but it had the money to pay off that debt. It's just that the people with the money were the same people who were legally exempt from paying taxes, and also the same people who were in charge of tax law. But the crown had to do something because by 1775, Louis had already had to put down over 100 different riots. In some sense, the revolution was already beginning to take shape. Luckily, as long as France didn't take on any outrageous new spending, they would be fine. Turgot, do you see what I'm seeing? Your Majesty, we mustn't. Turgot, who am I? The King of France, Your Majesty. Correct! And if there is one thing that I share with each and every one of my forefathers for the last 1,000 years, the very essence of what it is to be French, it is this. With God as my witness, when I see an opportunity to stick it to the British, I am going to take it! So the Yankees get independence and France gets another billion livres in debt. They tried to fudge the numbers by insisting that ordinary revenues covered for ordinary expenses, but that didn't make the problem go away. So a new plan was hatched to spend their way out of debt. All they had to do was get enough public spending going to bolster confidence, increase the amount they can borrow, and to do that, all they needed was some money from more debt or more taxes. If you think those are unpopular opinions today, when Louis tried to pass one of the most comprehensive tax reforms pre-revolution, not only did the aristocratic courts immediately shoot it down, even middle-class citizens were out in the streets burning effigies of the finance minister. And so if he can't afford to borrow money, and he can't muster new taxes on his own, there's only one move left. He must summon the Estates General. The most powerful and influential men in France are assembled in Versailles. Businessmen, politicians, landowners, priests, great thinkers, and war heroes. The Estates General was the only body powerful enough to break the deadlock and make new taxes, but it was also a huge gamble on the side of the king because they would have the power to make other changes as well. For instance, they undid a lot of censorship laws, although I'm not sure exactly what those laws were covering since there were already pamphlets literally called libels having a go at Louis's supposed infertility. This is totally unrelated but highly amusing. The pamphlets asked, "Can't the king do it?" And Marie Antoinette's brother goes, "Oh, I can confirm. he can do it. Because, and this is true, Louis and Marie Antoinette eventually had kids, but only after her brother, the goddamn Holy Roman Emperor himself, came to France, evaluated Louis's performance in the bedroom, and gave him coaching tips on how to apply himself to his marital duties. Now, he was never actually in the room, that would have been ludicrous, but he did write to his brother once, saying, and I quote, "Oh, if I could only have been present once, I would have taken care of him." And trust me, the full context is much more explicit. However, the Estates General had not been called in over 150 years, or 3 Louis ago, and it was janky as all hell. There were weird rules about who was allowed to wear what, and most importantly, it was split up into 3 councils that each got a vote. One for the clergy, one for the nobility, and one for the other 95% of the population. A bunch of folks in that third category go, "This is dumb. You're dumb. We're making our own council where we all get counted equally, and we're the ones making the laws." And a bunch of the priests go with them, and Louis goes, Wait, no, this isn't how this is supposed to work at all. What are you guys voting on there, guys? Stop it!" But it was too late. By this point, a majority of the estates had made the switch, and the monarchy was absolute no longer. So the French Revolution is weird because it kind of happened from the top down and the bottom up simultaneously, because this was a bunch of appointed officials taking power away from the king, but at the same time you've got stuff like the storming of the Bastille, which was the common people on the ground tearing down the old establishment. But in general, this was the phase when everybody still had their ships together. The National Assembly published the Declaration of the Rights of Man with a little help from Jefferson. All in all, it was the kind of origin story that democracies dream about, and for the most part, Mr. Will of the People seemed to tolerate it because he couldn't do much else, and maybe France could have transitioned with relative peace to a constitutional monarchy and eventually become like Britain is today. But one day the people showed up at his doorstep with guns. A bunch of women in the Parisian marketplace said to themselves, "Hey, we can't afford to eat. Isn't there somebody who's supposed to fix that sort of thing?" And soon enough, a small army of 7,000 had made their way to Versailles. A small delegation made their way to the king's chambers, to whom he turned on the charm and went, "Ladies, believe me, we are gonna disperse food from the royal stores, and you will not starve." But in a way that was somehow so charming that one of the women fainted, unless that was just malnutrition. But the rest of the crowd was not so moved. Is it just me, or is that angry mob getting bigger? Lafayette, defender of truth, justice, and the American way. "Lafayette, come quickly! Bring the National Guard! I've got some good news and some bad news for you, Chief. The good news is that the National Guard is already here. The bad news is they all joined the protesters."
They're inside the palace!
Come to Paris! "Your Majesty, if you wish it, I am here to die with you, but I have a plan." "Oi! Move the kids so we can shoot you!" "The people of Paris, we hear you, and we will go to Paris." "Your words, they move me. Long live the king! 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 At this point, the king kind of disappears while under house arrest in Paris, but it's said that when he arrived in the city, he came to visit an old, dilapidated palace and sat a while in its library, rummaging through its wise and dusty tomes to consult with the written memory of England's decapitated monarch. Meanwhile, the people of Paris were whipped up into a frenzy by guillotine enthusiast Maximilien Robespierre. Not only had Louis lost the support of the lawmakers and the goodwill of the people, he's completely lost his grip on the army. So if the French army won't fight for him, maybe the Austrian army will. After all, they don't want their people getting any ideas, and it would be great if their new ally wasn't too busy fighting itself. The royal family sneaks out a back entrance while Lafayette is supposed to be guarding them and makes it to the countryside. But just before they can make it to the Austrian border, somebody recognizes Louis because his face is on their money. Louis gets hauled back to Paris on charges of treason, which he thinks is ridiculous, but that defense didn't work out so well for England's Charles I. Meanwhile, Lafayette is held responsible for letting the king escape. Robespierre marks him a traitor, people start throwing stones at the National Guard, and the National Guard opens fire, killing 13 to 50 people, so Lafayette just accidentally did a Boston Massacre. The Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Prussia issue a threat saying that if anything happens to Louis, the French had better watch out. And oh boy, that did not make the situation better. It was really just an incidental little thing they said while they were partitioning Poland again, but those were fighting words. So even though you've got France's finest diplomats out trying to prevent war, France fires first. Because they didn't plan on hurting their king, but damn it, they'll fight like hell to defend their right to hurt him if they want to. The Prussian-Austrian army— oh my god, Prussia and Austria on the same side of a war, cats and dogs living together. They end up doing really well at first, but they declare their intention to restore Louis to full power, and that right there is his death sentence. He's found guilty of conspiracy and sentenced to immediate execution by one vote. Citizen Capet is marched to the scaffold and tells the people, "I hope at last I may make you happy, even if it is with my blood. But when one can be sacrificed for the many, why not 2, or 3, or 10? Little by little, we will find reasons for sacrificing the many for the happiness of the many, and we will think it was a bargain." Chapter 2. Uh-oh. I say, I hope this is the last of such unpleasant business. I thought it was all rather good. He had some good ideas there at the end. Max, that was a warning, not a suggestion. Max? Sorry, I thought I heard a negative Nancy. It's funny, no matter how many times we take care of her, negative Nancy is always trying to impede the revolution. You don't want to be a negative Nancy, do you? 1780. The future of France is up in the air. The royal coffers ran dry, paying for feasts at Versailles, while the people of France faced food shortages and price hikes that only seemed to get worse every year. Oh, but don't worry, Louis borrowed 1 billion livres in debt so that some British colonists halfway around the world could have their freedom. At the same time, a young Maximilien Robespierre has just graduated from law school. He's a brilliant and principled gentleman, an eloquent social activist trying to make a change in the world. He attacked the discrimination faced by so-called illegitimate children. He attacked the sidelining of women in academic life, and above all, he attacked the monarchy. The fact that the king could sign a letter and send you to jail without a trial, and certainly without collecting $200. The fact that the king could charge your son with a crime and then punish you for it. Hell, Robespierre even gave up his position as a judge out of opposition to the death penalty. Yep, Robespierre opposed the death penalty. Okay. Eventually, he makes a name for himself in local politics and becomes a deputy in the Estates General, France's big special committee that hasn't met in 150 years and is expected to solve all of its tax problems because the king can't figure it out on his own. The problem was, France was a modern society with a feudal government. The estate representing 95% of the population got 1/3 of the votes, and so, this is dumb. You're dumb, we're making our own council where we all get counted equally and we're the ones making the laws. And bam, just like that, they all got together in an old tennis court at Versailles and decided, guess what? France has a constitution now. Or at least, it's going to. It takes a while to write that stuff. Now, Robespierre is basically just some kid from another province watching history go down, but it doesn't take long before he gets some recognition because he's not a philosopher in an ivory tower. He's a protester marching on the ground with the women of Paris to hold the king accountable to the people. He's also a part of the Jacobin Club. For the purposes of this video, you can think of them like a political party. And he's new, but Max is killing it. In America, Hamilton defended the Constitution with 51 essays. In France, Robespierre's speeches defending the revolution numbered 328, all while working on that constitution and arguing that citizens shouldn't need to own property to vote, and that citizens shouldn't be property. Crazy stuff in 1791. That go-getter attitude gets Robespierre elected as the Secretary of the National Assembly, which is the thing that replaced the Estates General, except now it's called the National Constituent Assembly, but soon it's going to be the Legislative Assembly. Don't worry about the difference, shit's wild in France. The thing that's important is that in the middle of all these debates over how to form militias, the right to bear arms, the death penalty, Robespierre brings up a simple little motion that says, once they're done rebranding, no one from the Constituent Assembly is allowed to be on the Legislative Assembly, and he gets it passed. This seems wild because Robespierre is on the assembly, and so is everybody else that voted on it, but so were all the moderates, the ones dragging their feet on the revolution, the people who thought, okay, good job everybody, we're gonna be a constitutional monarchy just like England and it'll be smooth sailing from here. Frankly, their views weren't all too popular anymore, it's just that they were the biggest names in politics. But if they're banned from running, I guess someone more revolutionary will have to fill their shoes, won't they? Downside, the Legislative Assembly ends up being a complete failure with 23 presidents in 11 months. Upside, no more royal apologists in the Assembly, because it turns out the King of France is attempting to use a foreign army to crush the French people into submission. Monarchy is a bad look right now, and even the moderate royalists like Lafayette apparently can't be trusted not to massacre the French people. Downside, Robespierre doesn't want to go to war with Austria, but tough luck, he's not on the Assembly anymore, and Brissot, the new guy in charge, he does want war. The war goes to hell in a handbasket. The French army is not only undertrained, France is teetering on civil war. Most of the commanding officers are noblemen, so either they fled the country, or no one under their command trusts them, much less trusts them with their lives. That's why within 10 days of declaring war, the French went to battle, saw the enemy, immediately ran away, and killed their own general on the way out because he might have been part of a conspiracy, you never know. Everything comes to a head in 1792. Robespierre has just foiled another attempt by Louis to flee the country, and to be honest, everyone's kind of done with the king trying to sell them out to their traditional sworn enemies. Well, one day, the king's head of security is assassinated, and wouldn't you know it, the next morning there's an assault on the palace being led by Robespierre's friends, Danton and Desmoulins.
This might be it. Our last stand. Is there nothing we can do to win? Dear, when the enemy is at the gates, even when their voices roar like thunder, even when they number more than the hairs on your head, you must remember, there is always something you can do. Book it! Go, go, go!
In an act of humility, Louis runs to the Legislative Assembly for protection, only to find...
What are you doing? Get down! What are you doing? I thought I was the one under attack.
Well, you know how we decided not to prosecute Lafayette for his little whoopsie on the Champ de Mars? Yeah, turns out we're not revolutionary enough for the revolution. The king and his strange bedfellows in the assembly watched on to see what would happen to the Swiss guard defending the palace, and oh boy, it was not pretty. Eventually, the insurrectionists turned their attention to the assembly, and the assembly went, "We got him! Louis, you've been a bad boy, and you are officially dethroned!" Yeah. Just like that, France is a full-on republic, and the new face of the government is the Paris Commune, a hitherto unmentioned office led by Danton and Desmoulins. Desmoulins is patting himself on the back thinking, okay, good job everybody, we're a republic now, and it'll be smooth sailing from here. But that is moderate talk. The question remained, what to do with Louis? Brissot, who managed to make it out of the insurrection with some sort of a political career intact, argued that if Louis died, there goes all of France's leverage against Austria. And then, an orgy of evidence came pouring out of Louis's closet, revealing that a bunch of moderate revolutionaries were in Louis's pocket trying to keep him in power the entire time. So Robespierre has seriously got to grapple with his whole no death penalty thing. And at the end of the day, he argues thus. To leave Louis alive in prison would be to invite to his troubled nation war and treason, and to exile him would be more dangerous still. With regret, Robespierre declares a fatal truth. Louis must die so that the nation may live. Order! Order! All right, how many votes for guilty? Yep. All in favor of immediate execution? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. By a count of 360 to 360, it seems we have a tie. Sorry, King's cousin here, how you doing? I say we kill him, no questions asked. Well, the king's dead, so I guess we don't have to worry about people conspiring to put him in power. Should be smooth sailing from here. It wasn't. This may come as a shock, but in the process of restructuring France's entire government from the ground up, a lot of people had different ideas about how things should be run, and some people were more revolutionary than others. Now, the moderates were the Girondins, a faction within the Jacobins who basically wanted the same things as everybody else, but were like 20% less extreme about how to get it. But after everything so-called moderates did to betray the revolution before, Robespierre sees only two parties, the people and the enemies of the people. Robespierre begins to call for their arrest, and it turns out that when you threaten your political rivals with arrest and execution, they don't respond kindly. The president of the National the National Convention, he tells Robespierre, "You might have all of Paris wrapped around your finger, but the rest of France is tired. And if you continue to threaten the government, there's more than enough men in France to rise up against Paris." And Robespierre goes, "You may be right. But it would be a shame if the people of Paris got to you first." This time, the government is hiding in the palace, and so the palace is stormed once more. The Girondins are captured and taken as hostages, if not killed on the spot. Brissot, once charged with leading France, is charged now with treason and taken to the guillotine. Opposition to Robespierre and his faction is no more. With France under siege by enemies foreign and domestic, Paris must be of one mind. The reign of terror had begun. But Brissot was right about the rest of the country not being so keen on Robespierre and, terrorism. Frenchmen across the country rise up in revolt, and Robespierre asks himself, "Have I become the enemy of the people? No. The people are the enemy of the people!" Come October, the Constitution is suspended, and the new supreme government is Robespierre's deliciously ironic Committee of Public Safety. The French army is sent to suppress the counter-revolutions, while in Paris, Robespierre purges the city. The king's cousin is charged with the crimes of his son, guillotined. The philosopher Condorcet was a traitor who criticized the Constitution, even though the government suspended it anyway, guillotined. Danton, who stirred the people of Paris to storm the king's palace and slaughter the royalists in prison, too soft, a counter-revolutionary, guillotined. Desmoulins is a child, a spoiled brat whom others have led astray, but he needn't die. He'll burn his journals and show the people our answer to his outrageous criticisms, won't you, Desmoulins? Burning my criticisms is not answering them. What'll it be, Max? You were my friend, Desmoulins, but I must always choose the people. Which people? You'll guillotine every last man in France until there's no one standing but you and a very nervous executioner. Should I be worried? Only if you're guilty. Anyone who's worried is guilty. Robespierre decapitated so many people he had to upgrade the courtroom so he could sentence 60 people at the same time. Even former presidents of the Republic were getting axed. No one was revolutionary enough for Robespierre. And in the middle of it all, he ended slavery. Wild how one really good thing ended up in the middle there. Seems like the writers did a lazy job of trying to make him redeemable, but it never really went anywhere. And then he started a cult and parading around like a Roman emperor, and I don't even have time to get into all of that nonsense because my first draft of this episode was like half an hour long, but like, look at this. Anyway, France finally gets a big win over the Austrians, and for the first time, Paris isn't under threat of an imminent invasion, so the rest of the government asks Robespierre if maybe it's time to dial back the military crackdowns. And Robespierre tells them, "What did I tell you about being worried?" And yeah, saying you were worried was a literal crime now, because you were seeking to inspire discouragement, and all your neighbors, if they heard you, were legally obligated to turn you in. And you might think, wow, that's insane. How did they process so many cases? And I'll tell you how. They got rid of witnesses, they got rid of lawyers, they stuck 60 people in a courtroom, and if you were polite, you might be allowed to give your own defense for like 15 minutes, and then they either let you go free, or they decided you were a negative Nancy, and they f***ing murdered you. Robespierre's tribunal system abolished literally every penalty other than the death penalty. So the government is like, oh god, this guy's insane! And Robespierre crashes in through the door shouting, "Insane, am I? Is that what you've been thinking? You know what this sounds like? London propaganda. There's conspiracists all throughout the government, and I know who you are, and I'm coming to get you." And like, maybe he only had a couple people in mind, but he wouldn't show them a complete list of names, and everyone in that room is thinking the same thing about him, so he's just threatened to execute the entire government. So when Robespierre comes back the next day, everybody attacks him and says, "Traitor! You didn't run your speech through the committees before coming here. That's against the rules. You must be conspiring against the government." And Robespierre wants to be like, "Have you lost your mind?" But you're not allowed to talk in your defense if you're disrespectful. The only guys who step up to help him are his brother Augustin and a man named Lebas, who come up and say, "Oh yeah? If you want to kill Max, You'll have to kill us too! All in favor?
Aye!
So they're all sent to prison, but they break out, but the army hunts them down and is busting down the doors. Lebas kills himself with a pistol and hands it to Robespierre. Augustin just jumps out the window and impales himself on a bunch of bayonets like a maniac, and Robespierre tried to kill himself maybe, but they stopped him, so he shot himself in the jaw instead. He's sent to await execution in the same bed as Danton, just for poetic justice. But he didn't have to wait long because the Committee of Public Safety was very efficient. Max shuts his eyes tight as he's brought to the scaffold and sealed inside his own instrument of death. It's possible he had some last words planned, but to clear his neck, the executioner had to remove the bandage holding his jaw together, and he screamed. An agonizing, blood-curdling scream louder than a tiger. France's most eloquent locutor screamed and screamed and screamed until his lungs went empty forevermore. Chapter 3. France kills God. 1789. The people of France are poor and hungry, and the aristocracy is like, well, if they ain't got bread, why don't they just eat cake? They didn't say that, but the people thought they said that because when these people run out of bread, they eat cake, and when these people run out of bread, they starve. But the royal family weren't the only ones eating cake, no siree. This is the Catholic Church. Their top dogs live in palaces some aristocrats could only dream of, and some of them believe in Jesus. Some didn't, because when they're not praying for your soul, they're in the real estate business. They own 10% of France, meaning peasants in that 10% have to pay the church when they grow their wheat, and then pay the church again when they grind their wheat, and then pay 10% of whatever they have left, just 'cause. And the church didn't have to pay taxes because the church and the monarchy are BFFs. They've supported each other through thick and thin since the days of Charlemagne. The church gets tax breaks, and the king gets blessed as the God-certified mucho gusto good boy. But in 1789, the other 98% of everybody in France is not on board. They rise up and say, this is dumb. You're dumb. We're making our own council where we all get counted equally, and we're the ones making the laws. The people abolish feudalism, but that's not all. They declare, the people are free to worship as they please. They seize the church's lands to be auctioned away to the public and declare the tax on soul saving is over. But what to do with the priests? They won't have any money now, which makes full-time priesting kind of hard. So here's what they do. The government pays the priests' salaries, a living wage, and no more. All the priests have to do is swear an oath to France above all else. The revolutionaries weren't replacing the Catholic Church, you see, they were just replacing the Pope. And anyone who refused would have to face dismissal, deportation, or death. No, not death. It's barbaric, said Robespierre, who later killed 50,000 people. Besides, what about freedom of religion? This is actually one of the best chances for the king not to get guillotined if he turns on the church, but unfortunately for him, he's more devout than his priests. As far as he knows, taking communion from one of these bureaucrat priests would be heresy and risk his immortal soul. He writes to the Pope for help, and the Pope tells him, I don't know what to say, don't sign it, dude. Easier said than done when the king was being held prisoner in Paris. King Louis signs, but he makes a fuss about it, and the revolutionaries do not like that. Robespierre sentences the king to death so that France may live, and if the church and the king are gonna swim together, they're gonna sink together. So about half the clergy takes the oath, which means in theory, Catholicism can keep going strong, but the revolution is still heating up. This looks like a job for Joseph Fouché. Fouché was a militant atheist, and I mean a militant atheist. Wherever he went, no matter what problem he was supposed to be solving for the revolutionary government, he always made time to sack the churches and dress up donkeys in pope hats because "You God is a lie, death is forever, existence is meaningless." Christianity is the hocus pocus of the old regime. This is the new age of enlightenment and reason. We have the metric system, for crying out loud. There's no God in the metric system. But worshiping something is really fun. So let's worship reason. Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is redecorated for a festival of reason. But the organizer, one Monsieur Montmoreau, can't settle on a direction. On the one hand, it was supposed to be this pagan revival kind of thing. They had a goddess of reason and nature and liberty, but he didn't want to make statues because a statue of liberty would have been idolatrous, according to the second commandment of the religion he just replaced. So he got his wife to dress up in a sexy Halloween costume, and then he ran around Notre Dame going, "This is a metaphor. Liberty is a concept. My religion is fake." It was truly inspiring. The revolutionary government seemed to agree. They were preparing to give it their official blessing if it hadn't been for one man. And where do you think you're going? Robespierre watched Fouché tour France, writing "Death is an eternal sleep" over every cemetery gate, and had begun to question if sparkling atheism was right for the people. And you did not want to be on Robespierre's bad side. Robespierre had taken absolute power over the government and used it to behead anyone who got in the way of the quote-unquote people. And now he wanted absolute power over the church. He began by executing his neighbor Montmoreau. But God is dead. Then I'll make a new one. Where the cult of reason was a hodgepodge of conflicting attitudes and ideas, France's new religion, the cult of the supreme being, was the brainchild of a single prophet. Robespierre replaced sparkling atheism with sparkling agnosticism. His very first act is to write a sort of diplomatic envoy to God. France officially recognizes the supreme being, whomever that might be, and promises to worship said being by being good people and serving the people and killing bad people. Next, he must win the hearts and minds of the people in order to convince them of his new made-up religion and save their souls. Robespierre preaches to the citizens of Paris from the highest mountaintop. There are no mountains in Paris, so he builds one. People of France, there is no Christ, there is no Muhammad, there is only the people and some kind of higher power. Don't be religious, but be kinda spiritual and purge the non-believers. Robespierre was talking in very clinical terms about the social utility of a new civic religion, but that's not what the people saw on the ground. There was this whole other cult that started with a woman promising to give birth to God and ended with her disciples worshiping guillotine enthusiast Max Robespierre as the new messiah. So Max is giving a sermon on the mountain, these guys are bowing down to the Messiah, and all of a sudden, it clicks. Well, this is all a bit silly. Robespierre is fuming.
Insane, am I? Is that what you've been thinking? You know what this sounds like? London propaganda. There's conspiracists all throughout the government, and I know who you are, and I'm coming to get you.
This is all a bit silly too, isn't it? And they cut off his head, and France went back to being a bunch of Christian normies. Chapter 4. Sparkling Monarchy. 1794. The future of France is here, and it's rough. It's real rough. Citizens of Paris were executed for the crime of being nervous about all the executions, and I didn't even get to mention the casualties of the ongoing civil wars in the provinces or the thousands of people killed by mass drowning.
Shh! Do you hear that? That's the sound of forgiveness.
That's the sound of people drowning.
Jean-Baptiste Carrier.
That is what forgiveness sounds like. Screaming and then silence.
Things continued to get worse until eventually a certain national barber threatened to execute the entire government, and the government finally decided it was time to do something about him. So hip hip hurrah, but now what? Well, first things first, they had to dump all the blame onto Robespierre. Can't have anyone thinking there was more than one person responsible for the actions taken by a republic, after all. Just imagine if the people discovered that the government was still run by the same people who voted to execute the proudest voices of the revolution. No. Instead, the government is going to rebrand once again and put 5 directors in charge so that no one person can go off the deep end and take all of France with him. But without a clear leader at the helm, the new government had no idea what direction to go. But maybe centrism is okay for now. Everybody just wanted a break from Jacobins and monarchists killing each other as long as they got food on their plate. Oh, except the Directory removed the price cap on food, so prices skyrocketed, which is the exact thing that got this whole mess started in the first place. The government tries shutting down the political clubs so people will stop getting so political about starving to death, but all they manage to do is piss off everybody on both sides. Guess what, folks? It's the start of the revolution all over again. Tired of your old 1789 to 94 revolution? Why not trade up for the newest model? It's got everything you've come to expect. Riots in the streets, massacres in the prisons, civil war, and for a limited time, ask about this dude named after a Roman plotting an underground proto-communist conspiracy. It was a day like any other when a bunch of pissed-off royalists from the provinces came flooding into Paris, led by this pirate-looking dude who is famous for making owl noises. The director Paul Barras hunkers down with the rest of the Directory in the old royal palace, biting his nails because if the last 18 uprisings are anything to go by, he's currently sitting in the least secure place in the city. The revolution, or what's left of it, could die here and now. He has no choice but to leave the future of France in the hands of a young commander who happened to be in town.
Yer! Vive le roi! Vive le roi!
Kaboom! It was a massacre. Overnight, this low-ranking officer who'd been spending his time writing crappy self-insert romance novels became a national hero, and Barras goes,
Mr. Bonaparte, you have saved the people of France. Here, you are from Italy, right?
well, Corsica, but...
Your accent says enough. Here is an army, we need you to invade Italy. Bonne chance!
Well, luckily, it turns out Napoleon Bonaparte was an alright general. His basic strategy was to win the war not with his men's bayonets, but with their feet. He moved incredibly quickly, scavenging for food along the way, allowing him to get in behind the enemy and force a huge battle when they least expect it, thereby knocking one of his opponents out of the war before their allies ever got the chance to help out. But the real secret sauce was his PR. Napoleon wouldn't have made it this far if he simply won battles. He made sure everyone knew he was an inscrutable genius who balked at authority and led his men to glory no matter the odds. And in Italy, he would bring triumph to the motherland and forge a new era in Europe. In reality, he was tactically brilliant and incredibly charismatic, but he basically improv'd his way through the war and just took any opportunity that looked good to him. Napoleon chased the Austrians out of Italy and went, "I'm here. I've got all the guns. Hey, who wants to make a new country?" Kinda did the same thing in Egypt. Nelson shredded his entire fleet, so Napoleon goes, "Well, I guess I'm stuck being the king of Egypt for a while." And then he straight up ditches the war in Egypt and goes home without telling anyone. Then shows up in France like, "What's up? Check this out. Huge victory! The biggest! Don't read the newspapers." And, well, Egypt might not have been a success, but frankly, the rest of the War of the Second Coalition has been an even bigger failure in his absence. Everybody Napoleon liberated in Italy got recaptured by the Austrians, and the French government is collapsing. In fact, as soon as Napoleon arrives in Paris, one of the directors pulls him aside to say, "Hey, these guys are on their way out. I say we make a new government. I need the goodwill of the people, and I need the army. You've got both. What's in it for me?" Directory goes bye-bye. Consulship goes hi-hi. I'll need someone to share power with. I see. Just you and me splitting a power. Well, there would be 3 people, but... What? 3 people? Yeah, first consul, second consul, third consul. No third consul. What do you mean no third consul? That's not what a consulship is, that's a triumvirate. Well, what's wrong with a triumvirate? Lots of people have made triumvirates over the years. And did it ever work for those people? No, it never does. One person always ends up becoming a dictator or an emperor, they delude themselves into thinking it might be different, but it might work for us. I'm in. And so, one fateful morning, Napoleon's brother Lucien tells everyone there's a Jacobin uprising about to take place and everyone needs to take shelter, and who better to defend the government than the man who saved the revolution? All he'll need is complete control of the armed forces in Paris. But as the hours stretch on and Napoleon's general arrests a couple of directors, Congress starts to realize it's not the Jacobins who are planning this coup. In an effort to regain a hold of the situation, Napoleon strides into the lower chamber with an indomitable spirit, and everyone inside goes, "Get him!" And they beat the crap out of him. Lucky for Napoleon, his brother gets him out safely, and while the men inside are passing a motion to make Napoleon an outlaw, Lucien lays him down at the feet of the guards and cries, "My boy! Look what they've done to my boy!
Congress is being held hostage by conspiracists. They must be disbanded for the safety of France.
Okay, you owe me a big time. The coup goes according to plan, and boy howdy, who would have thought one of the consuls ended up with significantly more power than the other two, and guess who that would be? At which point, Napoleon speedruns his way to monarchy. Hey everybody, who thinks I should be consul for life? I'll know who you are if you say no. The best part comes after Napoleon survives a couple assassination attempts and thinks to himself, I may be the supreme leader for life, but if I died, people might try to put the Bourbons back in charge, right? Right you are, sir. Your safety is of the utmost importance. But you know what might stop that? What if, hear me out, what if my family were written into the Constitution as the supreme leaders for life? Sounds a lot like a king. No, as an emperor, totally different. I guess it sounds better than anarchy. Just don't overdo it. Behold, your new Augustus, the heir to Charlemagne, Emperor of France, King of Italy, and master of all Europe. From this moment hence, I am France. Time for more war. After that last assassination attempt, Napoleon had his men charge into Germany to kidnap some old French duke who wasn't even involved and plop him down in front of a firing squad, which was very not cool, and the rest of Europe has a bone to pick with him. This is their chance for revenge. The Allies lost so badly, the Holy Roman Empire exploded. Just poof, 1,000 years of history, gone. Now to take care of Britain. Oh, wait, no, fourth coalition. Prussia wasn't happy with Napoleon making satellite states in Germany, so it's time for revenge. Okay, Napoleon, maybe if we don't shake up continental politics every time we win a war, they won't keep coming back for revenge. Napoleon crushes them before anyone else has time to intervene. Back to Britain. Your Majesty, our navy is in no position to win a naval battle anytime soon after the Trafalgar incident. Cowabunga! Not to worry, I have a plan. We shall conquer the ocean on land. All we have to do is force everybody on the continent to stop trading with Britain, and they'll choke. Sir, I know, it's a ballsy. It just might work. Except it didn't. Portugal immediately noped out of that one, but hey, Napoleon's crushed his enemies before, what's one more? Two more? We're at war with Spain. L'Espagne is our ally! Was our ally, monsieur. As you're well aware, the situation in Spain was turbulent. The king was unpopular, and his son replaced him, no? Yes, but they both came to me for help. And so you chose the son who was very popular and would depend on you for power for the rest of his life? Napoleon? They wanted me to choose a king and I chose my brother. And then they betrayed me. Fifth coalition. Austria's back for revenge. Again. Napoleon smashes them and steals 20% of their population. At least marry a princess so we can pretend to be on good terms. Fine. You shit-a-stocking. I heard that! Napoleon is now in charge of nearly everything from Spain to Poland, but there's uprisings everywhere. Russian Tsar Alexander I takes one look at the situation, and considering what happens to Napoleon's friends, he decides now is a good time to stop being Napoleon's friend. He starts trading with Britain again, and Napoleon can't take that lying down, so he decides that what he still hasn't managed to do in Portugal, he can easily do in Russia simultaneously. But the Russians are wise to Napoleon's tricks. They cull the countryside of anything forageable. Napoleon's men are dropping like flies, and even when they finally make it to Moscow, well, at least it's warmed up. There's no choice but to retreat, and by the time he crosses the border, his grand army of 400,000 has been reduced to 10,000. And the rest of Europe? They like those odds. Within months, a new alliance was forged between Russia, Prussia, Austria, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, and of course, Great Britain. Finally placed on the back foot, Napoleon's old strategies are failing him. There are no vanquished foes to feed the war machine, no foreign lands to pillage, no way to force apart the Allies. All he can muster are Pyrrhic victories, but France has given all she can give. Paris is captured, and Napoleon is told he'll still be an emperor, but not in France. he's sent to the little island of Elba and kept under watch. In France, the Bourbons are back, baby. 20-some years and a million corpses later, it's another Louis back in action. The Allies are determined. There will be no empire, no emperor, not even a memory. If they can help it, the man who conquered half of Europe will have no legacy, not even as a martyr. But of course they could never succeed. The HRE was gone for good, Italian and Polish nationalism were on the rise, and all across Europe the seeds had been planted for the revolutions of 1848. Oh yeah, and Napoleon himself came back in less than a year. He steals across the sea with a boat with 1,000 men and marches towards Paris. He meets the king's men one misty morning and approaches them alone.
Citizen Bonaparte, on charges of insurrection. I'm just messing with you. Welcome back, big guy!
And this kept happening, wave after wave. Every time the army was supposed to arrest him, they switched sides and brought Napoleon right back to his throne in Paris without firing a single shot. The Allies scrambled to respond, and though France was in no better shape, things were set up just as Napoleon liked them, with the whole world against him. Before Europe could mobilize together, he would first cut off the British and stomp out his enemies one by one. But the British hold firm. Napoleon knows the taste of defeat, and for the first time, he hesitates. The Prussians arrive in time to rout the French, and Napoleon pleads, Okay, we'll give the empire to my son, yeah? Or how about I go to the US? I could be a farmer in Louisiana. Please, I'll even take a New Jersey. Shoot. Guess it beats the guillotine.
Epilogue: The one dude who didn't die.
Working in government in France during the long 19th century was challenging, to say the least. In 50 years, the country went from a monarchy to a republic to an empire to a monarchy, then to a different monarchy, and most of the time, working for the old regime was a great way to lose your career, maybe even your head. And yet there was one man who coasted through 6 regimes, a man, it seems, who never believed in anything. Not divine providence, not revolution, not equality, not conquest. He only believed in France. Monsieur Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord was born to an aristocratic house about as old as France itself, but it was never really a powerful house, and by the end of the 18th century, it certainly wasn't a rich one. His best option, if he wanted to change that, was to do what his dad did and join the army and climb up the ladder, but climbing was difficult for young Talleyrand, along with running and jumping. Anything to do with legs, really, because he was hit with a limp from childhood. So he decides to make some cash with his words and joins the clergy. He was a bright young pupil who spoke quite eloquently about the inalienable rights of the church, and so he got himself a bishopric and became an honorary member of the First Estate. And then he immediately backed off because it was becoming abundantly clear that the Third Estate was sick of everyone's shit and they were going to start alienating some rights. Talleyrand then drops his bishop hat and puts on his revolutionary beret. He rallies the people, crying, "Citizens, the time has come to nationalize the church and lay bare the inalienable rights of the people. The time has come to take back church property, of which I have conveniently recorded a meticulous itemized list during my time as a clergyman." And the revolutionaries have to agree, this guy's got some pretty good words, maybe even the best words. So he gets brought into the new government. He helps draft the Declaration of the Rights of Man. He's working to reform voting rights and securing loans and limiting money printing and advocating new regulation for police and what could possibly go, oh, right, him. Reign of Terror and all that, Paris devolves into a spiraling typhoon of revolutionary zealotry turned hysteria with no way back out, and Robespierre ordered everyone's heads cut off, including Talleyrand. But luckily for Talleyrand, he was stationed in the safest place a French politician could be at the time, London. He was over there trying to avoid war, like, please, just trust me, they'll get their act together. That didn't go so well, and then Britain kicks him out, so he's forced to couch surf with Aaron Burr for a little while until his friends in France manage to get him off the hit list. He gets a fancy new office as foreign minister, and then immediately causes a war with the United States because he wanted the Americans to pay to negotiate with him. But we pretend that never happened because just like every war since 1942, Congress didn't officially declare it to be a thing. All the while, Talleyrand's got his eyes on this up-and-coming General Bonaparte. Talleyrand starts writing him fan mail, and although they disagreed on some points, they end up becoming good friends. No, like actually just good friends. Napoleon ends up letting him in on a little secret that he's planning on overthrowing the government, and Talleyrand decides, you know what? I want a piece of that action. So with some fancy footwork I'll have to save for the Patreon commentary because it's kind of complicated, Napoleon ends up the most powerful man in France and transforming a consulship into an empire in record time. And then, oh boy, then he really starts popping off. So when Napoleon declared himself emperor, he modeled himself off of Charlemagne and included the title King of Italy. This angered everyone. But Napoleon had been planning for this ever since he sold Louisiana to the Yanks, and he created a navy to rival Britannia, at least when you also added Spain's navy. And unlike the last time Spain tried to invade England, this wasn't going to be decided by some freak weather. This would be a battle of epic proportions, a pivotal moment in world history that stood in the way of French dominion over all Europe. All I can say in summary is that Britain won. Hard, and that allowed them to be a thorn in Napoleon's side for the rest of his life, even when he won almost every battle he fought on the continent. Basically, Britain placed an embargo on France, and Napoleon said, "How can you embargo me when I control all of Europe?" And he turned half of Europe into French puppet states and bullied the other half into not trading with Britain anymore. I think it might be taken a little for granted in hindsight, but that's insane. No one had that kind of power since Charles V or Charlemagne. For Talleyrand, this meant life was good. Napoleon made him a Prince of Benevento, he's got several chateaus, and a celebrity chef at his beck and call. And he tells Napoleon, hey, now would be a great time to consolidate our gains. To peace in Europe, yeah? To peace and... What is that? What? That right there! That is Portugal. They're like 1% of Europe. They're traitors. Napoleon, it's not worth it. Please don't. And so war breaks out in Portugal. And it keeps going and going and going, and the British have an army on the continent again, and there's Spanish rebels, and on the other side of Europe, Russia's trading with Britain again, and Napoleon goes charging in over there, but they've dealt with this before. Napoleon can take Moscow if he wants, but there won't be much left by the time he gets there. Talleyrand is starting to see the writing on the wall, and the last thing he wants is for France to get Versailles once this whole thing is over. So he starts sending some postcards. Maybe, for instance, he had some secrets that Austria or Russia might be able to get some use out of. And when the Allies converge on Paris, they find themselves negotiating not with Napoleon, but with a provisional government supported by the Senate. The Tsar of Russia explains, look, we don't hate France, we just really need to get rid of Napoleon. Just hand him over, and we'll go back to before the revolution and pretend you didn't drag the continent into war for 20 years. What do you say, Mr. President? I dig it. Napoleon's carted away to Arkham, otherwise known as Elba, and Talleyrand is left to pick up the pieces. The Allies bring back the old monarchy, but with a constitution this time, and they still really want to punish France for declaring war on most of Europe 6 times, but Talleyrand takes to the stand to defend his country, pointing out, my dear friends, I think it is safe to say you owe me one. Russia, who was there for you when you wanted out of the embargo? Prussia, who gave you a shoulder to cry on when half your land was taken? By you? Look, we might deserve to be punished, but look what happened when one country got too much power. If you cripple France, then Britain would get too much power, and I think I speak for everyone here when I say we do not want that. To peace in Europe! To peace in Europe! Napoleon has escaped Arkham and taken over France! Waterloo ended up sorting things out, and Napoleon was sent to St. Helena, where he was never heard from again, but the next treaty was a little less lenient, and sure enough, the 19th century belonged to Britain, albeit not in a take over the entire continent kind of way. Talleyrand went into a sort of soft retirement, funding a very pro-Orleanist newspaper, and then the House of Orleans actually took over the monarchy, and so it fell to Talleyrand to explain to Britain, no, just because they're monarchs who took over power during a revolution does not mean that there's going to be another Napoleon. Unfortunately, he died in 1838, just 10 years before France was taken over by another Napoleon.